Hello and welcome to Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio. This is Stefan, your host, British by birth, American by choice. The Founding Fathers crafted some remarkable documents that led to the creation of a great country founded on liberty and self-reliance. I have lived in the Euro-socialist nightmare, and I'm doing what I can to return this country to the vision that the Founding Fathers gave us. We need to strive to rebuild that shining city on the hill, for without us, the world has nowhere to turn for freedom. For the next hour, I will be presenting news, views, and guests that help keep the true spirit of America alive. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Wherever, whenever you're listening to the show, this is Stefan, your Patrick Come Lately, British by birth and American by choice, and proud of it. Tonight is episode 234. It's coming from Georgia again. Next week I will not be in Georgia. I expect to be up in the New England area. So a little change of scenery for me. And, there's a lot to talk about. Plenty of other things as well as the Constitution. I'll be getting to that a little bit later. But, there is so much going on in the world, and I wanted to comment, first of all, on one very particular thing that is going on, and it concerns Dear Leader. And what is the sound that we haven't heard from Dear Leader recently? Well, let me play something. That's right. I didn't hear a golf whap in there. So I wonder he might have actually been working instead of playing golf. But anyway, and yes, he was actually working because we found out that the USA will be putting boots on the ground abroad, after all. But not in Iraq or Syria. No, he's going to be doing that in Africa to fight Ebola. Now, in my opinion, the one thing that I think the UN ought to be doing is fighting Ebola. But when they need us, the UN comes and asks us to help them out. So the US is going to spend our tax money saving Africa. Admittedly, Ebola could very well be a serious threat to the whole world, which is all the more reason for the UN to get their collective heads out of the place where the sun doesn't shine and cobble together a multinational force to step in. But they are far too busy condemning Israel to do anything useful, so they come crying to us, and we have to spend our money to go there and do something about this problem. I think it's about time we close down the New York facility. I've said this before. And my slogan is the UN out of the USA and the USA out of the UN. And by the way, while we're mentioning Israel, the obvious hatred for that country, which radiates from this regime, means that the regime will never turn to the best source of advice on how to correctly deal with ISIS. If there is one country and its intelligence service in the Middle East who probably know where the ISIS leaders are, who they are, where they can be found, and how to effectively eradicate them, it is Israel. But heaven knows King Barry would never deign to ask their advice. And I suspect that Netanyahu would love to tell Dear Leader to take a long walk off a short pier. But the destruction of ISIS is most certainly in Israel's interest, even more so than for the US, especially now when you see the tens of millions of dollars daily that ISIS is raking in, primarily through black market oil sales, plus the plundering of the banks in the cities which they have taken over in Syria and in Iraq. So all of that money makes them very dangerous. Talked about that before. We will be talking about that in the future. Anything happens here in the US, it may not be ISIS that does it, but they will have bought people to come here and create havoc and mayhem here in the US. Anyway, I'd like to say hi to Rex, who's joined us in the chat room. Just a reminder, at the bottom of the screen there, I'm told it's not a green speech bubble. That's what I see on my dashboard as broadcaster, but for my listeners, it's a black and white little speech bubble with some dots. I guess they represent letters in there. Click on that and it'll open up the chat window. Love to answer your comments and questions in the chat window as much as possible. We will be focusing on the constitutions this week, so perhaps a little less interaction, but I also like to see when there's multiple people in there, some interesting discussions going on. But I'd like to move on to my commentary right now. So my commentary for the week, I'd like to address some issues being brought up by my friend Dennis. I've mentioned him in shows now and again, and he sends me lots of emails, and we have some interesting discussions now and again. He professes to be a Republican of the old school, what he calls himself a paleo-conservative, and I think that's a term that I wouldn't shrug off either. I think that's a very good one, an old-fashioned conservative. But I have to say, Dennis, that you also sound a lot like an Occupy Wall Street rabid left-winger, because you rail against anything that seems to be to the right of Dennis Kucinich and call them extremist far-right GOP fascists. He hates the Tea Party and similar organizations and their leading figures with a passion. He does rail against Obama now and again as a tool of big business and again the extreme far right, which is kind of strange, but okay, whatever. But he's more likely to raise his voice against anything that the GOP does. He's constantly spreading what I consider misinformation about Fox News. Sorry, Dennis. I do think while they may be not totally balanced, they do provide a balance to the evidently biased media at all the other channels. And not just here, but even what he says includes holding up the BBC and Al Jazeera as paragons of truth. Now, sometimes he's just quoting other people, but sometimes you have to think about what you forward, Dennis. His main argument is that we are where we are today because the government is in league with big business, and big business equals the right wing or the extremist far-right GOP fascists. He seems to forget that the biggest donors to the Democratic Party are Wall Street and Hollywood, who are amongst the richest industries in the country. Again, Dennis, on the topic of government corporatism, I don't disagree with you much. We both agree that the best way to put this country back on track is to return strictly to the Constitution. And as tomorrow is Constitution Day, as I said earlier, more on the Constitution later. However, Dennis, I feel if you would open your eyes, or actually take your fingers out of your ears, you would hear the truth that the Tea Party is one of the few voices advocating a return to smaller government, just like you want. I think that one of the reasons that big business has such a hold on the government is because it is big government. If we devolved power away from Washington and back to the states, as the Constitution intended, it would be far less easy for big business to lobby their way into the laws like they do today. Instead of a few thousand lobbyists doling out billions of dollars in one city, everything would have to be multiplied by 50 to have the same effect. Would that be sustainable for big business? I doubt it. So, Dennis, I ask you, please listen carefully to what the Tea Party and many libertarians have to say. To think that they advocate total freedom is hogwash. Many times I have spoken that the true political spectrum is not right to left, but between tyranny and anarchy. What the founders envisaged, and what the Tea Party and most libertarians support, is not anarchy. They wanted some government, and our founding documents confirm that. However, today, between the federal government and big business, we are much, much closer to tyranny than to anarchy. So stand with me and other Tea Partiers, for want of a better term, and help us find the best balance between tyranny and anarchy. But please let us avoid the extremes at either end of the spectrum. Okay, so that was my rant for the week, and I have actually forwarded this text to Dennis. Be interesting to see how he reacts. I don't know if he has been listening to the show, but be interesting to see. So I think it's time to go on to the next topic, and that's going to be a number of minutes of talking about the Constitution. Tomorrow is Constitution Day, right? This is the day that was set up to celebrate the Constitution. It was signed on the 17th of September. So, like I do with the Declaration of Independence around the July 4th date, I would like to read some of that great document and then give my outsider or foreigner analysis. The document is longer than the Declaration, so I'm going to have to choose a few key topics to analyze. And before I start with the preamble, I would like to read a quote. I have a little book here which was published by, I believe, the Campaign for Liberty. And they put a very nice quote in this book from Patrick Henry, who was, as you know, one of the founding fathers, and probably not, definitely one of the ones that did not believe in having too strong a federal government. And he said, "The Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It is an instrument for the people to restrain the government, lest it comes to dominate our lives and interest." And do we not think that the government is dominating our lives and interests today? Most certainly they are. So I think that's a great quote by Patrick Henry, and something for us to think about as we go into the reading of these excerpts of the Constitution. Constitution starts with the preamble. What was the preamble intended? It was intended as a kind of an introduction to the document, to explain what the document was about. And it, in a way, it also gives kind of very high-level summary of what to expect in the following pages of that document. So let's go in there. So it starts with these famous words: "We, the people of the United States." And I'm going to, let me read the whole preamble, then I'm going to go back and dissect this, because I think, this is a very powerful sentence. It's one sentence, but I think it's a very powerful one. "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." Very, very powerful words. So let's go back. "We, the people of the United States," is how it starts. So even there, a very powerful statement. It's not "we, the governors of the states." It's not "we, the representatives of the people at the convention. No, we, the people of the United States. In other words, this is our Constitution. It is not the government's. It is our Constitution. And as Patrick Henry said, it is an instrument for the people to restrain the government. And those first words there, we, the people of the United States, emphasizes that. And it's something that we have forgotten and we should be reminded about. In order to form, and then we go into a list of things that this document's going to do, help us form a more perfect union. Well, as we know, the Articles of Confederation made it very difficult for the states to work together. So we wanted to form a more perfect union. We created the Constitution. We wanted to establish justice. So again, this is something that the Constitution is designed to do, establish justice. It's not the laws that we create, it's the Constitution establishes the justice. Everything else is built upon that. Ensure domestic tranquility. So as I mentioned earlier on, Dennis often rails against anything that's classified as right, classifies Tea Party as far right. No, we are not anarchists like Occupy Wall Street are. Even libertarians in most cases are not anarchists, because we know that we have to have a government to ensure domestic tranquility, and we have to have a government that is restrained by the Constitution, but we still have to have one. The preamble includes providing for the common defense, so we've got to have an army, we have to have a navy to keep this country safe. But I would say there, and now I'm going to sound like a libertarian and maybe even get accused of being an isolationist, the common defense, does that include waging wars overseas? Only when our interests are being affected. Now, remember, we fought terrorists in the 1800s. The shores of Tripoli, right? The Barbary pirates. So we've done this before. So if we have to go in and fight ISIS because they are a threat to us, the precedence is there. But in general, the army is really for the common defense, and it should be at home. We should only go abroad when absolutely necessary for our interests. The next few words are the most misused, I think, in the whole Constitution. Well, and then close to the First Amendment. But between this and the First Amendment, these are the two things that have most been used to corrupt our use of the Constitution and take it away from what it was intended. And those words are promote the general welfare. And it's that this is the one that basically they say, well, anything we do good for the country, food stamps, etc., that's the general welfare. It's not what the Founding Fathers intended, and it's so unfortunate that this is being misused. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And here's that great word, the blessings of liberty. Not freedom to do what you want, but liberty. Freedom to do what you would like, as long as you don't affect anyone else, and that's where most libertarians come from. And it's not just for the Founding Fathers, but it's also for posterity, for those that come after them. And then we do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Okay, that was the preamble, folk. I see I've already run over my first commercial break, so I'm going to stop here for a moment, and then we will continue right after these messages. And by the way, I want to thank you. If you need any of these services, use the 800 numbers in these commercials. Remember, that does help support the show.
You can lose 10, 20, 30 pounds or more with Maximum Slim's first ever rapid weight loss guarantee. Today, you get Maximum Slim, an advanced fat and carb blocker, absolutely risk-free. The all-natural ingredients in Maximum Slim are a powerful weight loss combination. The Maximum Slim formula turns your body into a fat-burning furnace that supercharges your weight loss. Advanced fat and carb blocker stops the breakdown of sugar so your body doesn't store it as fat. Today, you'll get both of these products absolutely risk-free with no obligation. Only pay shipping. There are no expensive meal plans or exhausting DVDs. Just take Maximum Slim twice a day. It's fast, simple, and now it's guaranteed. Look, you can start losing weight today or not. Go back to your high school days and wear your favorite jeans again. Guaranteed. Call now and get both weight loss formulas free. Call 800-451-0228. 800-451-0228. That's 800-451-0228.
Attention. Have you been in a serious automobile accident? Then you need to call our attorneys now. We specialize in helping our clients get compensated for major auto injuries. If you've been in any type of car or motorcycle accident and you've been seriously injured, you may be entitled to significant financial compensation. Our attorneys have recovered millions and millions of dollars for injured clients. There are no out-of-pocket costs to you ever. We only receive a fee when we win your case. We are available 24/7. If you've been in an accident and been seriously injured, make this free call to our attorneys now. Call the Personal Injury Center at 800-634-1315. 800-634-1315. 800-634-1315. That's 800-634-1315. This ad is paid for by participating member law firms. We are not an attorney referral service. Representation may not be available in your state.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us. And thanks for sticking with me through the break, folks. We're talking about the Constitution right now, and I have a little reminder for, probably not for my listeners, but you might like to pass these sentiments on to any of your left-wing friends, but from a very astute past president.
And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism.
So, some very, very astute words from dear Ronnie. Anyway, let's go back to the Constitution. Okay, Article 1. Just really one part I want to read there. Article 1 talks about, the House of Representatives, the Senate, how they're elected, etc. Section 1, though, is a very important one, I feel. It says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. All legislative powers. Wake up, dear leader. Your executive orders are not legislative. And, by the way, government departments as well, you unelected, faceless, corrupted bureaucrats, you do not make laws. All those regulations, etc., have the effect of laws, but they shouldn't be, because all legislative powers are granted to be vested in the Congress of the United States. That is the Constitution. So let's skip down a little bit. Section 3, and I didn't want to talk too much about representatives and senators, but there's one thing I do want to say. The original Constitution said the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. That's the beginning of Section 3. Unfortunately, the choosing of the senators was changed by the 17th Amendment. That is one of the amendments that caused the downfall of the Constitution, or is causing. It's not totally downfalling yet, but it definitely took away a lot of the power from the states and moved it to the centralized federal government, which is wrong as far as I'm concerned. So that's one of the amendments that definitely needs to be repealed. Let's have the power devolving back to the states. And there's a whole pile about how they should be chosen, etc. And let's go to Section 8. So we're still talking about what the Congress can and cannot do. And in Section 8, there's a long list very specifically of what the Congress is supposed to do. So again, the Constitution, as Patrick Henry said, is an instrument for the people to restrain the government, because it says, here's what you are supposed to do, and anything that's not listed here is not yours. Right? It shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. There again comes that general welfare phrase that gets so misused. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. The Congress shall have the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States, although, as far as I can see now, it's much more the president doing that, and to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So interstate commerce, true interstate commerce, is on their plate. But of course, our dear friends in Washington, including the Supreme Court, have decided that any sort of commerce in a state can have an effect on intrastate commerce, and then we get these all these strange things that the problems with the wheat farmer who was using his own wheat and got basically got hit through this interstate commerce clause. Total misuse of the Constitution. The Congress has the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and a uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. A uniform rule of naturalization, that is Congress's responsibility. So all this crap about dear leader wanting to write executive orders and give amnesty to illegal aliens is totally outside the Constitution. Wake up, America. Wake up, Washington. What that a-hole is doing is totally wrong. Congress shall also have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and fix the standards of weights and measure. This was another thing which we basically outsourced the responsibility to the Federal Reserve, which is not a government organization, in spite of the word federal in there. And so here again, Congress gave that away without really thinking about what they were doing. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. That's good. To establish post offices and post roads. The interstate system, you could argue that those are post roads, but anything else of providing money for roads, etc., not Congress's purview. Now, we collect taxes and fuel taxes, fuel excise, send it up to Washington, and then send it back to pay for roads in the states. Maybe each state should just collect their own excises and taxes. which is allowed for, even though Congress also has the power to do that, but states can do it as well. Promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors, in other words, copyright and patents, for limited times, except they've been extending and extending and extending, big business lobbyists again, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, fine, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offences against the law of nations. Let me read that again. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offences against the law of nations. This is something that's reserved to Congress. Surprise, surprise. So shouldn't they be saying that what ISIS is doing is wrong and then giving dear leader the authority to go take the necessary action? It's not up to dear leader to decide that. It's up to Congress. Does anybody in Washington read the Constitution? Anyway, folks, time for another break while I let my blood pressure go down. After the break, we'll continue with the Constitution.
Patriot come lately. British by birth. American by choice. Just like the Founding Fathers. The voice of the conservative resistance.
Boy, man, I had a rough night's sleep. Boy, I got a letter from the IRS yesterday and I just couldn't sleep. Man, I'm dying here. Somebody help me.
IRS problems affect more than just your finances. If you're ready to take back control of your life and you owe more than $10,000, you need to call the tax doctor. Their expert staff can immediately protect you from the IRS and state collectors and get you the best possible tax settlement guaranteed. The IRS has recently released new programs geared in helping struggling taxpayers, where you may qualify to settle your tax debt and wipe out up to 85% or more of what you currently owe. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, call the tax doctor right now. See if you qualify to pay less. 800-917-8546. 800-917-8546. 800-917-8546. Again, 800-917-8546.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us. And we're back in the show. Thanks for sticking with me through that break. And want to thank you for listening to Patrick Come Lately. Appreciate all the listeners. Want to remind you, you can send an email to stefan@patrickcomelately.us if you would like to comment on the show or have questions, especially for those of you that are not listening live and that listen to the rebroadcasts on that great network, Red State Talk Radio, or if you are listening to the recordings that are published at archives.patrickcomelately.us, or some of the other avenues to listen to the show. Stitcher Radio now is also broadcasting the show. Some ground stations are rebroadcasting the Red State Talk Radio feed, and I'm on that as well. So lots of way to listen. If you're listening there, email me or go to my website, www.patrickcomelately.us. Fill out the contact form and send me a message. Like I say before, I love hearing from my listeners. I will answer all your questions with an email. But on top of that, a lot of the time, unless you ask me not to, I will make comments about your email in the show as well, just to share it with other listeners. And one final thing before we go on, if you're enjoying the show, please tell your friends, family, acquaintances. Even if you're not enjoying the show, then please tell your enemies. But we need to get the message out. The November elections are coming, and we really need to get the message of conservatism, constitutionalism out amongst the people, and hopefully we will start changing the Congress and making it more of what it should be, and reining in the power that has been usurped by the current incumbent of the White House. Okay, let's go back to the Constitution. We're actually talking about Section 8 of Article 1, which talks about the legislative branch, in other words, the Congress, what they are and are not allowed to do. So we were talking about them defining and punishing piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offences against the law of nations. Very good description of what ISIS is doing and other terrorists, but that's a thing that Congress should do and not the President. Congress is also supposed to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Again, not the President. Congress is supposed to do that. Congressmen, read your Constitution and start acting like the Constitution intended you to. Now, to raise and support armies, that's another duty of Congress, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. In other words, the Founding Fathers didn't want the armies that were raised to be raised for too long. Now, of course, we now have a permanent one, but at least every 2 years we have to go through and think hard about what we want. Strangely enough, that same restriction was not placed on the next one, to provide and maintain a navy. So it was obvious that the Founding Fathers thought a navy was far more important than an army. Why would that be? Well, as I mentioned earlier, remember in the preamble, it said for the common defense. Defense. That meant defending the country from outside aggression. We're a country mainly surrounded by water, although, of course, we do have the northern and southern border. And that's why I think that the Founding Fathers thought the Navy was more important, because they were interested in the common defense. Not us going abroad and fighting people, but for the common defense. Now, there are occasions when you have to. They did it with the Barbary pirates. We have to do it with terrorists. But that's about all we should be doing. We are not the policemen of the world. But okay, that's a whole other thing. Let's get back to the Constitution. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. So again, it's Congress that decides things and then hands that over to the Commander-in-Chief, which is the head of the executive branch. Yes, dear leader. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Well, today we have, instead of the militia, we have the National Guard. So why was the National Guard over in Afghanistan fighting? This is executing the laws of the Union, suppressing insurrections, and repelling invasions. So we've been corrupting the Constitution yet again. Congress is also supposed to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So in other words, the National Guard, Congress should say how they should be trained, but the states appoint the officers and carry out that training. And that kind of happens today. So that's, yeah. Another thing for Congress, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as may be by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government of the United States. And to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenal, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So in other words, Washington, D.C., and then federal forts and other types of areas like that, that shall be governed by Congress. and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or any department or officer thereof. I read that twice because this is so powerful. So what they're saying is, yes, we define in the Constitution what you're allowed to do, and you can make any laws around that, but by definition, not around anything else. So the EPA, where does that come from? And this is where the misuse of the general welfare. Well, we've got to do that to make the air safe for everybody. The FDA, well, we've got to do that to make medicine safe for everybody. Department of Education, well, we've got to make sure that general welfare. That phrase is so misused. All of those departments should go. Now, do we need some kind of check on medicines? Perhaps. Should it be federal? Should it be state? Debatable. But the behemoth that the FDA has become and the length of time that it's taking to get, for example, medicines approved and the rigmarole that companies have to go through. No wonder our healthcare costs are going through the roof. It's because FDA is making it so difficult. Yes, we have to have some protection. There needs to be some protection, but not the nitpicking detail after detail after detail that we have today. So that was, let's see how we're doing on time. That was that part. So let's move on. Article 2 talks about the executive branch, right? The executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States of America. So the executive power. What is executive power? Executive power is to execute the laws, not dream them up, not change them, dear leader. So your executive orders should just be trash that I wouldn't even use to wipe my rear end with. They should all be countermanded. That belongs to Congress. You have to follow the law. You have to execute the law. Now, so of course, in the Constitution, they do give a list of what he's is and isn't allowed to do, and in Section 2, got a number of things. Has to do with being the commander-in-chief amongst other things. But here's one. He shall have the power, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. So he can't agree to treaties, and we know there's all sorts of machinations to try and get the UN Small Arms Treaty signed by dear leader, but it would not be constitutional. And hopefully we'll have some people with cojones who would stand up and fight that. So he can only sign treaties if the Senate agrees. And he shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers, consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. So, of course, this comes now into things like, cabinet postings and these recess appointments, etc. But Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the President alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. So, again, here Congress is kind of giving away some of their power and saying, okay, you can do that. You don't have to have that agreed by the Senate. And the final sentence there, President shall have power to fill up all vacancies that may happen during the recess of the Senate by granting commissions which shall expire at the end of their next session. Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to read that and say that may happen during the recess of the Senate by granting commissions which expire at the end of their next session. Happen during the recess of the Senate. So if there is a post open and during the Senate time they can't agree on someone because the president is putting forward people that the Senate feel are not suitable for that role, and then when Senate goes into recess, he then appoints someone. To me, that's totally wrong because that did not happen during the recess of the Senate. This is supposed to be that if someone dies while the Senate is in recess, that post can be filled by the president by granting the commission, but not for a post that was open before the recess happened. And also, of course, as the Supreme Court has said, thank goodness, also not imagining that the Senate is in recess just because they're not there, but they do have people actually coming to the Senate and opening business and then closing it. They are then not in recess, and just because you say that they're not doing business, it's in recess. Not your decision, dear leader, but thankfully you got slapped on the wrist by the Supreme Court on that one. Okay, folks, it is time for the last commercial break, so stick with me, and we're going to continue with a bit more of the Constitution.
Reporting from the eye of the storm. This is the worst weather we've seen in quite some time, folks. And I don't see any end in sight. People have been calling in from across the state complaining their basements are flooding. One guy said he now has an indoor swimming pool in his basement. I told him he needs the waterproofing innovations from Basement Systems. If you want a dry basement or crawl space that will weather any kind of storm, you need the patented solutions from Basement Systems. You've seen them on home makeover shows throughout the country. With a lifetime warranty, every solution is custom designed for your basement. Call now for a free estimate, and you'll never have to worry about storms like these again. I'm predicting this storm front is heading your way, so call Basement Systems and relax.
Call 800-205-8665 for your free in-home inspection, or visit basementradiooffer.com. That's 800-205-8665, or visit basementradiooffer.com.
I've owned my company for 14 years now, and I can tell you that payroll is a 4-letter word. I hate doing it. It eats up hours I don't have, and it costs me money I could be saving. But my accountant's too expensive, and I'm not sure who to call, but I know I need help.
We're Paychex, and we take all the hassles out of small business payroll. We save you time and money. It's easy. Call, fax, or give us your payroll information securely online, and we take care of the rest. We calculate the correct taxes, manage payments and direct deposits. We even send out your checks. Payroll doesn't need to be a 4-letter word anymore. We're so sure that we can save you time and money that we'll give you a month's payroll free. Just for calling 877-750-5371. Get 1 month's payroll for free. Call Paychex right now. 877-750-5371. That's 877-750-5371.
This is Patrick Come Lately Talk Radio, coming to you live via the internet, via rebroadcast on WRSDB, the Red State Talk Radio Network, or from the recordings at archives.patrickcomelately.us.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
And some more very wise words from dear Ronnie there. We're getting... this is the final segment of the show. We're getting close to the end. So much in the Constitution we could talk about. I want to take one last piece. From Article 3, this is from the judicial branch, obviously, talking about what they can. But there's one thing I want to bring up because it is kind of current. Section 3, it says, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them. So all those Americans who go to ISIS, do you agree with me? They are committing treason, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. And I think that one very clearly describes our dear friend Bo Bergdahl. Some will say no, he was captured, but most of us know from the evidence given by his friends and his colleagues that that was not true. I'm going to close down the show now. Thank you for coming. Don't forget to tell your friends about the show, because I've got something that I would like to play. I think it's very apt to play today, and look forward to speaking to you next week from Connecticut.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights, oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets trembling, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free, and the home of the brave? Because we are the brave. Yes, we are the brave. We'll fight you in the name of the brave. We are the US of A. For those unaware, that flag is still there. It's our future to save. This land of the brave, the US of A. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free, and the home of the
TTFN, folks. See you next week. Thank you for listening to the show. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's topics. Whether you listened live, to a recording, or to a rebroadcast, I appreciate the time you share with me. We need to spread the message of liberty far and wide, so please tell your friends and family about the show. Thank you for helping to keep the beacon of hope burning. This is Stefan, your Patrick Come Lately, signing off. God bless America, and remember, L3, long live liberty.